that?
It was awesome. I mean, I was very involved. So I got to work specifically on a guy's case. His name's Daryl Howard, and this is all done now, so I can talk about it. But, yeah. So he was wrongfully convicted in a double homicide in Durham, North Carolina, and he got sentenced to 80 years. 80 years, and he served about 20 of them.
Welcome back to another episode of the What's Your Motive podcast. Today, I know I always say that I have a special guest, but I have a very interestingly special guest today by the name of Justin Padway. He's a criminal defense lawyer. He'll elaborate on that as we continue to have a conversation, but let me rave about him for a minute here. He's a Wisconsin super lawyer rising star from the years 21 to 2024, which is great. Top 40 under 40 trial lawyer in Wisconsin. Top 50 attorney from America's Top 50 Lawyers, a AVVO Client Choice Award recipient from 2018 to 2024. He enjoys basketball. He's a music lover, an artist, actor, and family man. And I'm just super intrigued to hear his story, pick his brain a little bit. Shout out to Corey and Leonce for introducing us kind of like virtually and things like absolutely. That. So, Justin, welcome to the What's Your Motive podcast. How you doing?
I'm doing great. First off, that's the nicest introduction I've ever received in my life, so I appreciate it.
You're accomplished, man. You're accomplished.
Thank you. And I love what you're doing as well. I'm honored to be here. There's probably not a better place that I could be right now. So man, I appreciate you having me. I truly appreciate it.
Not even Coffee Chat Sundays?
I love Coffee Chat Sundays. Shout out to Corey.
Shout out to Corey.
This is epic right here too.
No, for sure. Thank you so much for being here, man. I've been looking forward to it. I've been thinking about it all week. Like, you're my first lawyer. Like, cool. You know, this is great. And I've been watching you like on Instagram. I see you, like you said, you're trying to get more visibility on there.
Sure.
And it's been great. Like, I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, how did I not, come across you? Yeah. But it's wonderful when you have people that are connected, and that's what we're here today. So, for those that are watching, and for myself, tell us a little bit about your upbringing.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in Fox Point, about 10 minutes outside of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. My dad was a criminal defense lawyer. Okay. My mom was a social worker. Okay. I went to Nicolay High School. Okay. Basically, my entire youth was all about playing basketball. I know we've talked about it a little bit, but I mean, my goal as a kid was just finding the best games to play in. Right. That's ultimately what I love to do. Ended up going to Madison for school. Okay. After Madison, I knew that I really wanted to kind of leave the state of Wisconsin. I wanted to experience something different, so I ended up going to New Orleans. I worked as a community organizer for a company called Volunteers of America. Okay. So basically what they did is they tried to find, or try to basically bring people in that were displaced by Hurricane Katrina and create housing for them. So I worked in this small community called the West 30s, where I became a community organizer, and just had like the best experience.
In New Orleans?
In New Orleans. So I lived in New Orleans proper.
Did you adjust to like is it like a lot of intense heat and things down there? Like
a lot of intense heat. Yeah, humidity, heat.
Marshland, right?
Marshland. I was mostly in the city, so I wasn't in the marshes. But where I was working in the West 30s, you'd have to drive across Lake Pontchartrain. Okay. There's about a 28-mile bridge, literally across a lake where you can't even see the other side. Yeah, pretty crazy.
Okay, so let's pause right there because someone just told me about that bridge. How you drove across that bridge a lot?
Every day. Every day I would go into the West 30s, which,
Did you ever get used to the ability, like you said, you can't even see? I heard like it's a really, really like eerie type bridge.
It's eerie, but it gives you a lot of mental clarity. Because you're just kind of zoned out for that period of time, and you're just, every which way you look is water. And I know that sounds kind of terrifying at first, and maybe it is at first, but eventually, it's just a very smooth, relaxing ride. So,
crazy.
Was in New Orleans. Mm-hmm. After New Orleans, that's when I decided I wanted to go to law school. Okay. A lot of the stuff that I was doing in the West 30s was kind of blocked up by not having a legal degree, not able to get funding or grant money or things like that. Mm-hmm. So I really wanted to go to the school, Cardozo School of Law. And that's in New York City. And the reason I really wanted to go there is because they started, and I don't know if you've heard of it, it's called the Innocence Project.
Yep.
And it was started by a guy named Barry Scheck.
Okay.
And to me, he's one of the most influential attorneys in the 21st century for criminal defense work. He's basically revolutionized the game through DNA evidence. And I knew that I really wanted to be a part of that.
Okay.
So I got into that school. I was accepted in the Innocence Project clinic, and I got to work there to try to exonerate people that were wrongfully convicted. Wow. Which was amazing to start your legal career there. Now it's post-conviction work, which I don't do now. Now I do trial defense work, so I'm on the ground. And basically, if you're in the Innocence Project, then you've been convicted, and they're trying to use advancements in science or basically re-reviewing a case to figure out how can we exonerate this wrongfully convicted person.
How involved was that?
It was awesome. I mean, I was very involved. So I got to work specifically on a guy's case. His name's Daryl Howard, and this is all done now, so I can talk about it. But, yeah. So he was wrongfully convicted in a double homicide in Durham, North Carolina, and he got sentenced to 80 years. 80 years, and he served about 20 of them. And we got the case, and there was local counsel there. And then Barry Scheck, obviously, and the Innocence Project are more at the forefront than myself at that point in time. But we're still kind of all working together to try to figure out how to exonerate this individual.
Right.
They get DNA testing. So DNA basically had the advancements in DNA is crazy. They now use what's called PCR testing, which allows you to take a small sample and amplify it. So you can really kind of figure out, do we have enough of a sample to identify somebody else?
Innovation.
In this case, they did. And the craziest part about this case was, at the time, and I'm sure you've heard of the Duke lacrosse case.
Yes, I have.
Yeah, so that was in, I think, 2005.
Yes,
and there
that was
yeah.
05.
05,
Yep.
Yeah, something like that. Mm-hmm. And there was an infamous attorney, his name was Mike Nifong, and he was the assistant district attorney at the time.
Okay.
And he's a guy who was hiding evidence in that case that ended up exonerating those kids. And in this case, he was also the ADA for that case, for the Daryl Howard case, and he ended up hiding evidence, and we ended up discovering that, and ultimately he was exonerated. So, I mean, that's how my legal career kind of started. It was a pretty cool experience.
Hiding evidence?
Hiding evidence. So we call it a Brady violation in my world.
Brady violation.
Brady violation. So
legitimately hiding it, not disclosing it.
Not disclosing it. So in the world of law, a defendant has a constitutional right to exculpatory evidence. The DA's office, or whatever the prosecuting agency is, DA or U.S. government agencies, they have an obligation to turn it over to the defense. And we're constantly scouring evidence for it. And if it's not turned over, then it's called a Brady violation, and somebody can be either exonerated or there's other types of ramifications for that type of misconduct in office.
So Daryl was able to be exonerated because you guys were able to discover the hidden evidence.
Yeah, correct. And, it's a nightmare, right? I mean, this is a really powerful government that's obligation is to give somebody a fair trial. And that's why I think at the end of the day, an attorney is so important to represent somebody against a really powerful entity that's trying to take somebody's freedom.
That's crazy because when I'm hearing you say that, you just think about the powers that be, like you said, someone just being so powerful that they can hide something.
Yeah.
And then, a person that's in the criminal system, in jail or prison or whatnot, they may feel like there's no light at the end of the tunnel, so they might not even fight for it. So that's why you said it's super important for lawyers to be able to come in and be like, hold on, let's knock on these doors. Where's this stuff?
Yeah. So when I take a case, the first thing I'm doing is I'm analyzing every ounce of evidence. So we get what's called discovery in my world.
Okay.
What that basically means is any police reports, any body camera footage, any witness statements, any search warrants, any affidavits for the search warrants. And we're taking it apart and we're analyzing every ounce of it to figure out what did the cops not do. So is there footage that would actually show what really happened here? Is there a Burger King that happens to have footage? Or what exists, I know it exists, and I don't have yet. And then it's pushing that envelope each and every way so that I can ultimately get this complete picture to prepare the best defense I possibly can in a case.
That's so deep.
Yeah, it's pretty deep.
That's a lot of attention to detail. And I mean, I'm assuming over the years as you've been practicing, you've gotten even quicker and more efficient with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think I would say in any industry, your industry, the legal industry, medical industry, really anything, it's all attention to detail, and whoever's going to outwork the next person is going to be in the best position to succeed at the end of the day. Doesn't mean you always succeed, but I wouldn't feel good knowing I took a shortcut, especially when the stakes are this high. It's so I got to work there, right? And then after that, I ended up working in a big law firm called Paul Weiss.
Okay, I've seen that.
Yeah. So basically, if you've seen the show Suits, you're kind of sitting up in a high rise. I got stuck on a financial crisis case where they were trying to evaluate the value of what's called exotic credit derivatives. I couldn't even tell you what that means today, right?
Exotic credit derivatives.
Basically securities. So asset securities. Okay. So when two companies went bankrupt back in 2008, and at that point they called it an ISDA contract.
Okay.
What is the value of those? And I was sitting in that litigation, and I realized I'd be sitting in this litigation for 4, 5, 6 years. And I looked at myself and I said, this is not why you became a lawyer. This is not what you want to do. I'm not interested in these golden handcuffs. I don't want them. So I left pretty quickly. I was the first in that class to leave. I just knew I had to follow, my heart, what I wanted to do.
Got you.
And at that point, I had been out of Milwaukee for 10 years, and I said, I want to go home. I want to do defense work. This is where my heart lies. I want to be in this community that I care about.
Gotcha.
And that's ultimately what brought me here. And now I'm sitting in your basement. So
that is crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, just for the simple fact that you taking that leap of faith and like leaving Wisconsin, going to New Orleans, you end up getting into the Cardozo school. The Innocence Project, because I've heard of the Innocence Project.
Yeah.
So you're working and doing this Exoneration Project and things like that, getting these people off, dipping into some exotic, what is it called?
Portfolio exotic credit derivatives. Crazy. We never have to say it again. Crazy. But that's what it's called.
I'm going to Google that later. I just want to let you know that.
Yeah.
And then for you to bring it back to info and come back to Milwaukee, come back to where you were born and raised and things like that, and try to do this work in the community, it means a lot, man. It really means a lot. And again, like, I commend you for it, and just that whole journey you just took us on is wonderful. I'm over here being a student, I'll tell you that, like, listening to hanging on to every word you're saying. Is there a reason why you wanted to become a lawyer? Like, is it because, like, I know you said your dad, your mom was a social worker, those things, did they have an impact on you in terms of that?
Absolutely. So, my father was my role model growing up. He passed when I was too young. He passed too young, but he was an excellent criminal defense lawyer. And I just saw, how much he cared about that field and how much he was able to humanize people from all walks of life. And I just always looked up to it. I really, really did. I mean, some of the craziest, I can tell you one quick little anecdote, but I remember, some of my dad's clients who would be accused of certain things where society would look at them as outcasts, they were my babysitters, right? And, I remember this one story or this one incident where I was young, I was probably 5 or 6, and I was on the driveway and I'm kind of stomping on ants. And this guy, who society would say is one of the worst of the worst people, or wants to just alienate him, looks at me and says, "Hey, man, why are you doing that?" And I was like, "I don't know."
Right.
And he's like, "Well, they got feelings too. Or, they want to live life just like you do."
Right.
And from a young age, that always stuck with me because it just showed me the value of not judging a person and to be able to defend people that society wants to outcast. It just always stuck with me as something I wanted to do.
Wow. And it's crazy that for you to remember something at such a young age, and you still remember it today. And those are those indelible marks that we kind of like keep and hold on to. Right. And it kind of keeps us grounded. Would you say, like, some of those moments and things like that?
Absolutely. It's crazy what you remember as a kid and how they end up shaping you.
Right. For sure. So as you continue to practice over the times, like, what is one of the most challenging things about being a lawyer?
Criminal defense lawyer or lawyer?
Criminal defense. Because you do civil,
different types of challenges. I do some civil. If a cause really strikes me that I want to represent someone in, I will. But criminal, I think, is where my heart lies.
Okay.
But I think some of the challenges. Wow, there's a lot of challenges. Obviously, you have to handle an immense amount of pressure, right? People are trusting you. You're looking at them in the eye and looking at their families in the eyes, and they're trusting you with some of the most difficult situations in their life, and the relationship becomes so intimate so fast, right?
I can imagine.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously the pressure is a huge challenge. Every case is so uniquely different. And I think that's ultimately what makes me love this job so much is that on one case, I might have to become an expert on forensic toxicology, right? It's an OWI case, and all of a sudden I need to figure out, did the lab do its analysis correctly? Is this machine operating correctly, right? In the next case, I might have to be an expert in DNA evidence. In the next case, fingerprint evidence. In the next case, it might end up being, how ShotSpotter works. So it's all different each time. So that's what's so challenging but so fun.
Okay. So what is the most rewarding piece?
Wow, there's so much rewarding. I think the most rewarding piece would be just helping people. Uh-huh. I mean, I think ultimately when you get the result that you want to get, and not only do you get the result in the justice system, but you get the result from the person you represent, it's incredibly impactful to me, and it's what keeps me going. So when I can change a young person's life, or I can help give them the support, or I can show them that somebody cares about them and wants to advocate for them, I think that ultimately is the icing on the cake.
Right. Do you find yourself representing a lot of, because you just mentioned like younger people, do you find yourself representing a lot of younger individuals?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's obviously the juvenile justice system, and then there's the adult system. Juvenile being anyone under 17 years old, or you can waive into the adult system.
Right.
So there's a lot of juveniles. There's also a lot of 18 to 25-year-old. I'd say that's the majority. But there's also a lot of 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds, 60-year-olds that I end up representing. It. The ages vary. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, there's a lot of young kids in our system.
Do you ever, or have you ever had to kind of like discuss or consider or try to have a jury or somebody consider like the brain development of like a younger person? You know what I mean? Like, because what does they say? Like 25 is when the frontal lobe is actually complete. And when I think about that, because, just being in education, you see these kids make mistake after mistake after mistake at young ages. But it's like you kind of look at them and, we see a lot of teachers like, don't you know that? Shouldn't you know that? Right. And I always have to remind them like, no, that's what we're here to continue to remind them, because they're still exploring. They don't know. Everything is super impulsive. Have you ever had to like mention that or?
Yeah. So excellent point. Like phenomenal point, honestly. So you can't mention it to a jury, because a jury is there to determine guilt or innocence, and that's it. But if you're doing a sentencing and that's already been determined, or you've accepted a plea that's a really good plea for your client, and at the end of the day you're trying to keep them in the community, then it's a huge argument in terms of why this person needs just the community resources so we can help develop that, and why they make some of the split impulse decisions. Because we know when we think about justice system, when we think about putting somebody in prison, we know that people don't think, studies have consistently told us they don't think about the punitive aspect before they commit a crime.
Correct.
So there's really no, you can send them to prison if you want to send them to prison, and you can isolate them from the community, and then they can learn from people that have, criminal tendencies. Or you can say, hold on a second. This person is young. Prison isn't going to stop the impulse control. Let's figure out the community resources that help them. So it's a huge argument, and it's a very good argument, and it makes a lot of sense, and it's backed by science at the end of the day.
Right, because I think I was either reading something or listening to something, and so when you just brought up like the young people, I started thinking about those brains, and I always hear them say, like, I think years back in like the 90s or early 90s, late 80s, they used to give you, kids could get like juvenile life. Yeah. But now that's kind of like, I think, abolished now for the most part, if I'm not mistaken.
State by state, it just kind of depends. We don't really have a life. Their life is first degree homicide, but other than that, we don't really have life, but we have a lot of time. Right, that basically is like life. Right. Yeah. So like the brain development piece, like you said, you couldn't mention to the jury, but it could be submitted as like what they call like a mitigating factor. Yeah, mitigating factor in sentencing. So it happens a lot. It's something that every lawyer that has somebody under the age of 25 should be utilizing in their back pocket to help advocate for their client.
Got you.
Yeah. And, we submit studies, in the way that I do things, I submit studies. Nothing is taken for granted. I want to make sure that the judge understands that this is where we're coming from. And it's backed by science, empirical data, which ultimately, is the most important thing. Yeah.
Man, that's crazy. Yeah. Because I just think about that, just, always dealing with kids. And it's like, when you see a lot of kids, even some of my former students have like, been gone to jail. I've shown up to different hearings and things for them just in support. Right. Try to talk to them and send them books and things like that. But I always just think about like that brain part and wondering like is that ever mentioned or thought of? I understand like you can't just let a kid do things and or even, let's say they are given some kind of community resource,
right,
and they kind of fall short by like not doing it regularly and things like that, then something else has to come from it, right?
Right. Well, yeah, I'm not. Yeah, and I think, you understand, being an educator, that we are not as bad as our worst acts, right? And I'm sure you've had some kids that have had behavioral issues, or I know you've had some kids that have had some behavioral issues, but you know that probably there's an underlying cause for that. They're not inherently bad.
Thank you.
Right.
So
the next goal is, how do we actually make society safer? And then we have to answer that question. And the justice system is so often placed in a difficult situation where they're supposed to figure out how to make society safer. And we know just sending somebody away doesn't necessarily do that. Now, I'm not saying not some people do need a break from society.
Absolutely. Got you.
I agree. Some people do.
Absolutely.
But I find it more rare than you think. I really do. And at the end of the day, I think the goal of the system should be to create a safer community. And that often means finding the resources for the young individual that needs the resources. Find the underlying factor of the cause of the behavior.
Agreed. I agree. And that leads me kind of like into my next question in terms of like, what are some like common misconceptions about that you may hear about lawyers or the legal system?
Yeah, I think some common misconceptions, and I'm going to defend lawyers here for a second, is a lot of people look at lawyers and they say, oh, they're out there to just make money, or they're slimy, right? You hear that conception of lawyers, or you see it on TV.
Yeah.
And I think some are, sure. But I think at the end of the day, the good lawyers genuinely care about the human being.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm putting so much of my own time and energy, and I tell my clients, your job is to get involved in the community, and I'll give you the resources to get a job and get employed, and I'll help you get a job and I'll help you get employed. My job is to sit with your case and stay up late at night. That's my job.
Right.
You don't worry about that anymore.
Right.
You worry about going forward and bettering yourself, and I'll give you the help and the resosources. I'll worry about your case at night. It will keep me up at night.
Absolutely.
So I think when you care, and that misconception that some lawyers don't care, or they, railroad you, you've kind of heard those terms from the justice system. The good ones, man, they care.
Right.
They really do.
And I would agree with that, because like you said, that is a misconception for a lot of people where they even feel as if the lawyer needs to do everything and they have to do nothing.
Right.
When it's like, no, you actually have to try to do something to better yourself.
Right.
Get out there in the community. I'll show you how to do it, or where to go. You have to get up and do it, especially as an adult, right? And then even, like you said, getting a job.
Right.
You have to go out there and figure it out. I'll try to show you where you can get it and give you a lead, but you have to do it. So I think a lot of people kind of want to sit on their hands and feel like, oh, well, I'm sitting on my hands. You want to, oh, woe is me. Yeah. While you're up doing a lot of the research and things like that.
And I think, that comes down to your relationship with your client, right? If your client believes that you have their best interest at heart and you are connecting with that human being, they're going to listen to your guidance much better than if you're absent and you call them just before a court date and all of a sudden you're meeting them in the halls of the courtroom. I don't do that. That's not my practice. You're coming into my office. We're going to spend time together. I'm going to get to know your mom. I'm going to get to know your aunt. I'm going to get to know your grandparents. We're going to spend the time together so that I build the inherent trust where you know that what I'm telling you to do is ultimately for your best interest.
I wonder... Listen, Justin, you sound like a teacher. I want to tell you that.
Okay.
What you just said is so golden, and I wonder how common it is for, and like you said, we got some great lawyers, and we have some, that a lot of people would call, like you said, slimy or whatnot. But the fact that you take the time to have them come in and sit with you one-on-one with their family, their loved ones and things like that, to build those relationships, it makes me think about a teacher as well. So that's why I say you're like a teacher, because as a lot of teachers get into those classrooms, you can't just get up there and just say, do this, do that, and instruct. You do have to force those relationships. So you're a teacher in your own right, whether you know it or not.
Maybe I'm just holding parent-teacher conferences at all my
There you
meetings,
go.
So
there you go.
What's happening.
Parent-teacher conferences, one-on-ones, and things like that. And I'm sure that's why a lot of your clients that you've had truly, truly trust you, because just having that time to actually speak with them one-on-one. And I'm sure you have to be upfront with them and be keep it real, right?
Yeah, you got to keep it real. I mean, I'm not here to sugarcoat anything. We know it's a serious situation. Follow my lead and we'll be all right. But follow my lead, and there's always it's high stakes. So
Have you ever, just any time, either have you seen something or have you ever dealt with a case or whatnot that kind of was conflicted with maybe your beliefs at all?
No.
Okay.
Okay. And a lot of people will ask that question.
Right.
And it's a very fair question. Look, as a defense lawyer, you're defending a human being, but you're also defending a system.
Gotcha.
And like we talked about, there's this big, powerful government. It has all the resources in the world, all of them. And they're coming down on this one individual, right? And if you take a shortcut on this individual, then who says you can't take a shortcut on the next individual? Or if, let's say, hypothetically, someone's clearly guilty, but law enforcement violates their constitutional rights. They don't get a search warrant, or they stop their car just because they're black, or they stem the traffic stop based on the smell of marijuana, quote unquote, or they search the vehicle based on, So, you're defending a constitutional rights, you're defending a constitution, you're defending ultimately the right to a fair trial. And you're making sure, even if somebody is, let's say, it's not a good trial case, it's not a good suppression case, does the punishment fit the crime? And so many times in the past, and we know from mass incarceration, it doesn't. So there's just so many wonderful avenues that you can help people in that. It's never been an issue for me. And if it is an issue, I'm not the right attorney for the job, and I'll turn it down. That's because beautiful. That person deserves that full advocacy. Got you.
Totally understand that. I just always wonder about those types of things. It's like, dang, like, you do what? You know what I mean? Yeah. But that's great that you're like, I know what I'm defending. I know what I'm up against. But like, you have no problem saying like, I might not be able to do this when you might need to, so you can have the proper representation.
If it's a case that I don't feel like I can do, or it doesn't align with me. But again, my job is defending the justice system as a whole in terms of giving somebody a fair trial, protecting their constitutional rights. It's so much bigger than the individual person and whatever that crime or that allegation is.
Right.
I mean, obviously there's a micro component to it, but from a macro perspective, no shortcuts. And we're the ones that ultimately stand between that powerful government and making sure they're crossing their X's, dotting their I's, whatever it is.
So you say you're in between the justice system and then your client.
Yeah.
Right.
You're,
so it's kind of like basketball. You got to be between where?
You got to be between your defender and the hoop, man.
You're
player in the hoop.
Yeah, all the time. Look at that. Look how quick you were able to say that.
I always tried to do that, man, but some players are too good.
No, for sure. Have you worked with any cases that were involving like discrimination or human rights, things like that? I know, like you told us about the exoneration of Daryl Howard and things like that. But any in Wisconsin, in Milwaukee?
Yeah. So we do some civil rights cases. A lot of times they start from criminal prosecutions. I mean, that's ultimately where they start from. So, I've run across certain officers or in certain cases where you're seeing repetitive violations of people's constitutional rights. And ultimately, in my world, our job is to suppress that evidence. If you obtain the evidence unconstitutionally, you take a shortcut, then I'm going to attack whatever that misconduct was, whatever that violation was, a Fourth Amendment, generally speaking, and then we're going to get the evidence suppressed. Then we'll decide from that point forward, do we want to pursue a civil action or not, or do we want to refer it out to somebody else? But we do some, we've done landlord-tenant work. Landlord-tenant work, which is a big hot topic during the COVID pandemic.
Oh, right. Especially when people couldn't work and things like that, right?
Yeah. We actually got the biggest landlord-tenant settlement or lawsuit in Wisconsin history.
The 1.3
1.35.
Yeah, I was reading that. Yeah.
Wow. So, and that's all, civil right violations and tenant violations and ACLU violations. So
when you say like suppressing evidence, right? So is there ever a time where you might be in the middle of a trial, right? And it's like the prosecutor comes up with some information, you're like, hold on. Like that shouldn't be there, where you have to have the judge, like, what do they say, like, strike that? And
so
like, how hard is that for a jury to like?
Oh, okay.
So
very
you understand
hard.
What I'm saying?
They call it, once you ring the bell, you can't unring it, right? It's impossible, right? Suppressing evidence hopefully is all happening before trial. Okay. So I'm reviewing the discovery. I see different, let's say my client makes a statement, but they're not read their Miranda rights, or there's coercion in the statement. I'm getting that suppressed before we even get before a jury.
Got you.
I'm identifying those issues. I'm going before a judge. I'm filing a suppression motion, and I'm hopefully succeeding in the suppression motion so that either the case needs to be dismissed or we're playing with a different set of facts before the jury. If, the state brings something up that wasn't turned over to me in discovery, well, that's going to be a discovery violation. So that's not necessarily, that's a state statute violation. It would be 971.23. Yeah, I mean that's kind of one of those you got to know that one. You got to know that one. So you got to know that one. But yeah, then you'd want to get that struck, and then if the jury hears something that they're not supposed to hear, yeah, I mean it's tough. You can do a couple different things. You can move for a mistrial if you think it's incredibly prejudicial, where this jury is never going to be fair again.
Right.
Judge could deny your mistrial. You could ask for a special jury instruction on the issue. Sometimes, frankly, there's a lot of strategy in it. So sometimes if something comes up, but I don't think it kills my case, if I object, now all of a sudden the jury's like, what's that about? It almost like brings their attention to the question. So you have to make a strategic decision in that moment. Do I want to draw attention to this? Or do I want to maybe wait for the jury to leave, but then I can lose the right to preserve the objection? So there's just a lot that goes on at all times, and it just depends on, the severity of what shouldn't have come out that did come out.
There's a
and
lot
your
of
gut instinct.
It sounds like a lot of tactics, and when you're in the midst of a trial, is it like I know you prepare and plan, but are there some times where your instincts that take over?
Absolutely. I mean, you prepare. Look, preparation is the most important thing in anything you do. Any nerves that you have, you get rid of those through preparation. Okay, and I do the best that I can to prepare for every single. I'm looking at a case. I say, if this happens, then this happens, and this is going to happen, but then this could happen, and then that. And I'm constantly trying to figure out how I'm going to deal with everything pre-trial. But there is a trial is like a basketball game, right? Like you got to react. There might be a backdoor cut that you weren't even ready for, and is all of a sudden, are you going to help D, or are you going to leave the shooter open, or what are you going to do, right? So yeah, you're constantly making game time decisions, and you got to be flexible, and you got to listen. So a witness, you can have some idea what they're going to say, but the best lawyers really listen, because doors open when you listen
to the testimony.
I mean, it should be as much of an engaging conversation as possible that you're having with the witness, so that when they all of a sudden say something, you're ready for it, or you can elaborate on that really helpful piece of testimony that you never thought you'd get. It could be gold.
Something super small.
And you jump on it. You say, okay, I like this. Let's explore
that. What is that feeling like for you? Like,
yeah, it's the best. It's the best. When you're on fire, when you're feeling it, when you're with it, when you're in the moment, when you're present, and you hear that bit of testimony, and they open that door, and because you're prepared, you're ready to go down whatever door opens with them. And yeah, it's a wonderful feeling.
Do you remember your first time having to get up there?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Were you nervous?
Yeah, of course. I'm still nervous. I mean, at the end of the day, I think being nervous means you care.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And there's I think being nervous can be such a tool, because it creates so much raw emotion that if you can harness, it's real, right? When you're nervous, you can feel your heart rate, you can feel, the shakiness of your voice, but it can also turn so quickly into passion.
Gotcha.
That I think it's a wonderful tool. But yeah, I do remember my first time in a real serious court hearing or a court trial. I remember both my first suppression motion, my first jury trial. Yeah, and it's you're nervous, but you're addicted after.
Oh my gosh, it's crazy. I can only imagine. I've seen, we watch TV shows, and I've been in the courtroom and things like that. You mentioned Suits earlier.
Yep.
Is there any drama or TV show that you know of, or even movie that somewhat accurately or almost accurately projects or shows lawyers?
What it really feels like? There's a few.
I know it's dramatic. I know, stuff is dramatic. But...
Okay, I can give you different movies for different scenarios if you want.
Yeah.
There's a movie called The Chicago 7, which is a really interesting, I think it was on Netflix. It's pretty good. It gives you the idea of what it feels like to have the world against you when you represent somebody.
Okay.
So maybe not courtroom drama being super accurate, but as a defense lawyer, you have to understand when you step in that courtroom, you're the only person advocating for somebody that everyone else has decided is guilty. I mean, I know there's a presumption of innocence, and it's so important to maintain it. But basically, the state said this person's guilty, and you're the one that's standing between it. So it can be a hostile environment sometimes.
Right.
That's a really good one to understand kind of what that feels like.
Chicago 7. Okay.
Presumed Innocent, which I'm actually watching right now,
okay.
is really interesting for Courtroom.
Okay.
And how, it's kind of accurate, I guess. Okay. No, nothing's super accurate, I don't think. Yeah.
So as a lawyer, though, and even criminal defense or whatnot,
Sure.
do you find yourself watching things like that? So, for example, like, remember when They See Us came out?
Yep.
For the Central Park 5 or whatnot.
Yep.
And then even Rob Peace, I don't think they did, like, that was his dad, though, more so. But, like, When They See Us, do you find yourself watching those things? Or
not as much as you think, because it's kind of like you live it.
Gotcha.
Right? So you want to kind of diversify your interests.
Right.
But Central Park 5, super interesting documentary. I actually met those guys because they're associated with the Innocence Project in New York. So
maybe that's where I end up hearing about a lot of that, right?
So I think some offset of the attorneys from the Innocence Project ended up doing their civil suit.
Crazy.
Yeah, so I met those guys.
Wow, how was that? Like,
amazing. I mean, special.
And all that time served, like, to finally be exonerated, like, that's that's like crazy.
And also just, that the biggest, I mean, obviously that was crazy, but the way the media portrayed those kids and the verbiology that they used and the language that they used.
Vilified them.
Kids, vilified them. And, I think one of them had a learning disability, and you kind of learn more about how difficult they use what's called the Reed technique. Law enforcement does, not as much anymore, but the Reed technique is a technique that basically attempts to elicit testimony, or in this case, witness statements from people through kind of coercion.
Yeah.
It's a terrifying technique. It's studied to get the answer you want to get. How's that fair?
I know.
And you have these young kids that, some of them have learning disabilities, some of them don't, but they've never been in a justice system. It's incredibly terrifying. They're sitting in an interrogation room. They're under arrest.
As a kid.
Even as an adult. Think about it. I know.
It'll be a lot, you know what I mean? Even though I know they dramatized it a lot, but I can still only imagine what it was like back in the 90s. Like,
I know. I have a hard time thinking. So nowadays, everything's on camera, which I think is the most wonderful thing in the world. I know exactly what you did, right? I can't imagine what it was like if it was my client's word versus a law enforcement officer's word in a courtroom. Who's going to win that? Every time, So nowadays, I think I'm in the golden age of criminal defense. It's also, much more difficult to commit a crime now, right? Because you have Ring cameras, you have everything everywhere. You have your cell data, which is telling you exactly where you are, pinging everywhere. So, there's investigative techniques have gotten much stronger. But also, everything that law enforcement does is under a watchful eye, and we get to analyze it, and it's much more helpful from a defense perspective just to make sure that constitutional rights are being followed. Yeah.
So this might be a tough question. How long do you think you're going to be doing this?
Yeah,
because you've been in it for a nice amount of time now.
Yeah, I no interest in slowing down.
Okay.
I love this. I'm very lucky that I love what I do. I think I would be bored if I didn't do it. So, at some point, I will retire at some point. I don't know when, though.
You don't know when?
Don't know when, and nowhere near it. Obviously, from an age perspective, but also, I'm not tired.
We're still young. We're still young.
We're young. We're young. We're just getting, in the legal career, you kind of, you hit your prime later on, too.
Right. I always hear that. I've heard that.
You do. It's a cool profession in that way.
So, obviously, you have a family and things like that. Like, how do you, as far as, like, being a lawyer and, like, having to, like you said earlier, you do what you do, and I'm gonna stay up night. That's gonna keep me up at night. Like, how do you balance, or because can we truly balance our lives like that? You know what I mean? Like, do we have that much, kind of like control? But like, how do you kind of like
compartmentalize?
And still be able to like be with your family and things like that.
Yeah.
Do you set aside time or?
So I'm firmly of the belief that I'm the best lawyer when I'm my best self. I'm fortunate that I have a very supportive wife that loves what I do as well, so I can talk to her about it. You know, if I couldn't do that, that would be pretty difficult.
Shout out Mrs. Padway.
Shout out Mrs. Padway. We actually just had our first child.
Congratulations.
So 3 months, which is awesome.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
What'd you have?
A girl. A little girl.
Okay.
And I think at the end of the day, you'll have to give me advice.
I got you.
It creates levity to everything, and it gives you an idea of just, what you're doing is important, but also, there's a balance to things. And I think ultimately when you have that balance, I can come to work refreshed, I can come to work rejuvenated, I can come to work my best self. And ultimately I need to relate to people in what I do, to jurors, to clients, to district attorneys, to judges, and being well-rounded in that and being well-rested and spending time with the family helps me be better at what I do at the end of the day. So, yeah.
That's beautiful. And I think like society, like in the earlier stages, in the earlier ages, like when we were still young, a lot of times it was like just work, especially as a man, right?
Yeah.
Like, and now it's like, no, as a man, I still should work, but I still should have some time to, like you said, be my best self.
Right.
And whether it be, spending time with my family, especially my children, looking at them in their eyes, but then also maybe going to the gym. I seen you shooting some baskets. I see you got, you know what I mean? That like how, refreshing and relaxing is that to like just away from everything.
So I'm going to recommend a documentary to you that I just watched. Okay. Just Dads. It's completely off topic.
Okay.
It's called Dads.
Dads.
And it talks about kind of the evolution of what a father is nowadays versus back then. And back then, I mean, there's different for every family. Don't get me wrong. But back then it was more about providing for the family, going to work, and, maybe spend time on the weekends. Right.
Right.
But it's a wonderful documentary that basically focuses on how that's kind of changing. And we're a dual role now.
A lot more involved.
And ultimately, I find it to be wonderful.
What do you know what's that
on Apple TV or Prime or something? Okay. I don't know.
Yeah, I'll check. I have it.
Yeah,
so that's
great. It really is great.
You've got to get all these subscriptions now, right?
It's crazy.
All right. So I got two final questions.
Sure.
For someone that's considering getting into law or anything like that, what type of advice would you provide them with? Whether it be a young person in high school or someone that's actually in college on that track?
Yeah. So I would say reach out to people that have done it, because we are a wonderful community that really does help other people get involved in the community, understand what you want to do. I would say reach out to other people, explore different areas, because it is such a diverse field. So, like I said, when I started doing portfolio exotic credit derivatives, completely different than what I do now. I hated that. I love this.
Got you.
So, whether it's civil rights, whether it's, personal injury, whether it's criminal defense, whether it's business law, figure out what you're passionate about. It is a lot of work. So make sure it is in an area that you're truly, truly passionate about. And then it won't feel like work. So yeah, reach out to me if you're interested. I mean, literally, I would be happy to talk to anybody. I think it is such a noble profession. So if you're interested in the law, reach out to me. I promise you, I'd sit down with you, I'd talk to you about it, and I'd help guide you.
For sure. Are there opportunities for like younger individuals or people that are like, going to school for law, volunteer opportunities?
Yeah.
And things like that, like for them?
So there's a lot of clerkships, which you can do, which is a little bit more difficult. That's through a judge. There's clinics. So something like the Innocence Project was a clinic. There's the eviction defense clinic. So there are different types of clinics where they will help you get involved.
Okay.
You obviously can't make a court appearance unless you have an attorney there with you.
Right.
But I spent a lot of my summers interning at different legal firms, not really knowing what I was doing, but getting experience in PI, getting experience in business law, just kind of figuring out which area was most interesting to me.
Okay, that's good. Because I always wonder, like, a lot of times we go to college and we get that just a strict academic piece, right?
Right.
But we don't get any like experience.
Right.
So like you said, I didn't know about a clerkship. I know about internships when I did like healthcare, and I tried to volunteer different places because I was like, I know I need some experience, and that's kind of like how you get your experience.
That's how you get your experience. Clerkship would be with a judge, so that's not necessarily in a law firm, but that would be with a judge where you'd see different attorneys come to court. You'd get to do legal research. You'd get to figure out what area of law you want to do. And then there's those clinics that you can do, that eviction defense clinic, again, Innocence Project, all sorts of different, I'm not sure exactly how many there are, but there's tons of different clinics where you can get involved in. There's a lot of opportunities.
Got you. That's good info because I never knew. That's why when I knew I had you on, I was like, I got to ask him these questions because I don't know this other side. Like down at MATC, I know they have like a pathway where you can do like some legal things.
Sure.
Where you can be like a paralegal studies and things like that. But I was wondering, like, how do they get their experience? You know what I mean?
And that's a great, paralegal is a phenomenal starting point to figure out, do you actually want to be a lawyer? because a paralegal is a lawyer's right hand. They're incredibly helpful. They're doing the research. They're looking at the discovery. Sometimes they're drafting some things for lawyers, but then there's that in-court component that they're not allowed to do. So it's a great place to start. Figure out, do you actually want to be a lawyer, or maybe you like to be more behind the scenes? It just depends.
Got you. And then do you have like a team? Are you working with a team?
Yeah, we have a team. So we have a team of attorneys, and then we have, paralegals at our firm. We have administrative assistants at our firm.
Okay.
We're a smaller firm, which I think we like being a smaller firm. I think it's more intimate and more personal.
For sure. I can imagine.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you're as good as the people around you at the end of the day. And the more you build people, the stronger your product is and the stronger you are. Nobody can do it alone. So,
I agree. No one can do it alone. You definitely need a team, like you said. And like that small, intimate team, I'm sure is the reason why you've been so successful, and been able to do some great things. So my final question.
Yeah.
And you've kind of been talking about it just as we've been in conversation, but what's your motive?
Yeah. I think my motive is justice at the end of the day. Equality, making sure people are treated the same and making sure people are treated fairly. When I take on a case and I have that intimate relationship with my client, and like I said, their family and their aunts and their grandmothers and their parents, making sure I do right by them. I always say, the fear of losing motivates me more than the joy of winning. When I win a case, I enjoy it. I enjoy it for a day or a weekend, but it's on to the next. When I lose a case, which I like to say is not often, I try to,
for sure.
But when I lose a case, it sticks with me forever. So when you have that motivation, that it's not I want to win, it's I'm not losing. That's the way I approach a case. I'm not losing. I mean, that is an immense motivator, and ultimately that motivation of I'm not losing comes from that care that you have for that individual. So my clients motivate me. Believing in them and being their advocate is something that is a great honor to me, and gets me up at 4:30 every morning, and
4:30
makes me fight.
Got you. Are you a coffee drinker?
Huge.
Gotta be. Obviously, coffee chat Sundays, right and all that.
Right.
But man, thank you so much for that. And I listen, Justin, this is my first time meeting you, but I can hear the genuineness and the fact that you keep talking about like just having those relationships, and I understand how important it is. Like building relationships and having relationships to be able to build the trust with those people that you are going to be representing. Yeah. And for them to be like, okay, and allow you to do you while also them do them, and you work together in alignment to try to, like you said, win the case. Yeah. And
like better the human.
Yes. And better the human for sure.
Win the case, better the human, or just help the human.
Got you.
So, and I just want to say, I'm again honored to be on here, and what you're doing is also incredibly impactful from an educational perspective. Everything starts with education and guidance to our youth to make sure that they're in the best positions possible to succeed. Absolutely. And, you're going above and beyond that and creating connections throughout the community of Milwaukee so that people have resources and people can help each other. So, I'm, again, like I said, no place I'd rather be than here this morning.
I really, really appreciate
and
you,
I
man.
appreciate you.
Thank you so much for coming through, man. Where can the people find you? Just so, those that are viewing.
So, Instagram is a great place, right? I mean, nowadays, you can find me on Instagram. We've just kind of started that page, and we'll keep evolving that page so we can reach more people. God, I can't even think of my handle right now. Justin
Padway.
Padway_law or Justin Padway Law.
Yep.
Padway Law Offices, our website.
Yep.
Our phone number, really. And once you become my client, I give every client my cell phone.
Gotcha.
Every single client my cell phone, because I want to be accessible during that difficult time.
And that's beautiful. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. What you got going on for the rest of the day?
Client meeting, Packer game.
Client meeting, Packer game.
Client meeting, Packer game, family time.
Are we winning today?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks again, man, for coming through, man. I really, really appreciate you. It's been a treat. Absolutely. But we'll stay in contact. I got something I want to give you too before you leave. So
cool.
All right. So until next time, what's your motive?